Stimulants have long been known to enhance combat performance, keeping personnel awake, alert, and hence alive after prolonged periods of fatigue. Intoxicants also take off the edge, enabling soldiers to cope with the traumas of the battlefield. Drinking and drugging rituals have even helped soldiers bond, which is crucial for group cohesion and morale. And since long periods of boredom are also part of war, soldiers have even reached for intoxicants because they simply had nothing else to do. Drugs and warfare have always gone hand in hand, from Homeric warriors drinking wine and taking opium, to German Wehrmacht troops taking methamphetamines. The truth is, soldiers have been fighting while high for much of history. Consider the following examples. The legendary Viking warriors known as Berserkers were renowned for their ferocity in battle. Witnesses say they fought in a trance-like state of blind rage, howling like wild animals and biting their shields, and even often unable to distinguish between friend and foe in the heat of battle. Recently, a new name has started to become popular for them: the Mushroom Warriors. This is because it's believed that they took mind-altering substances in order to bolster their fighting capabilities. A plant called henbane is the likely candidate due to its prevalence in the Viking homelands. Accounts of berserkers date back to the late 9th century poem describing them as being mad as dogs or wolves, and as strong as bears or wild oxen, killing people with a single blow. Specific attributes can vary wildly among the accounts, often veering into magic or mysticism. There are even claims that berserkers were not affected by edged weapons or fire, but they could only be killed by clubs. Most accounts at least agree on the primary defining characteristic: a blind, ferocious rage. Recent studies have shown us that henbane can in fact cause anger that ranges from agitation to full-blown rage, as well as combativeness depending on the dosage and the individual's mental state. Henbane can also dull pain and can contribute to the inability to recognize faces, as well as lower blood pressure. All of these findings support what first-hand witnesses of berserkers would describe. Back in the days of ancient Greece and later ancient Rome, it was quite normal to give soldiers a daily ration of alcohol. Many army leaders back in the day would use free booze as a way to motivate soldiers. It was also one of the most popular methods for anesthesia in injured soldiers. Military campaigns in those times could easily take several years, and alcohol turned out to be a great substitute for a warm household and a loving wife. It was also quite common to promise soldiers as much as they could drink when they would be victorious in battle. The Macedonians of Alexander the Great, for example, were notorious drinkers. What better way to motivate your armies to conquer half the world than promising them endless drinking orgies? During the Napoleonic Wars, the British Army gained a reputation of being quite slued, or lushy, or malty as they would say back in those days when going into battle. The daily booze ration for an English soldier back in the day was 1 gallon or 3.78 liters of beer, a pint of wine, or a half pint of spirits, usually rum. Interestingly enough, when the soldiers wanted to test the quality of rum they were given, they would mix some gunpowder with it and try to light it. When it lit, they were sure that there was at least 57% of alcohol in their drink. Another interesting fact is that in those days, most of the soldiers who were fighting for the British were actually recruited with alcohol. After many hours of free boozing, many were surprised the next morning when they found out they had agreed to fight for the British cause. The First World War brought cocaine to the front lines. The drug, which was first developed in the 1860s, was used by German and French pilots as a stimulant, as well as Canadian infantrymen. The British Army even issued a medicine containing cocaine and an extract from the kola nut, known as tabloids or forced march. It was said that cocaine would encourage fearlessness and often combat fatigue. Self-prescribed consumption was also widespread as cocaine proved to be an effective boosting aid in the trenches. Incredibly, London pharmacists sold medical kits containing cocaine and heroin. Girlfriends would happily buy the boxes, advertised as useful presents for friends at the front, and eagerly sent them to their boys, fiancés, and husbands on the front lines. One quote from a Vietnam veteran's daughter is quite striking. "My dad very rarely talked about Vietnam. He was an NP in the army, although he did tell me that he was stuck guarding a bridge for over 24 rotations and was supplied with coffee and copious amounts of cocaine when on that detail, all by his superior officer. The use of methamphetamines, better known as crystal meth, was particularly prevalent during World War II. A pill form of the drug was distributed by millions to Wehrmacht troops before the successful invasion of France in 1940. Developed by the Temmler Pharmaceutical Company based in Berlin, Pervitin was introduced in 1938 and marketed as a magic pill for alertness and antidepressive, among other uses. It was quite briefly even available over the counter. A military doctor, Otto Ranke, experimented with Pervitin on 90 college students and decided based on his results that the drug would help Germany win the war. Using Pervitin, the German soldiers could stay awake for days at a time and march many more miles without resting. Over 35 million tablets of Pervitin were used to fuel the Nazis' blitzkrieg invasion of France. It should be noted that Germans were not the only ones using performance-enhancing drugs in World War II. Allied soldiers were known to use amphetamines, commonly known as speed, in the form of Benzedrine, in order to battle combat fatigue. Although the use of drugs can greatly increase the effectiveness of any given soldier, it can also severely hamper them. To finish off the video, here is the British testing LSD on their soldiers.
The drug was administered in a drink of water given at the start of each day's exercise. 25 minutes later, the first effects of the drug became apparent. The men began to relax and to giggle. But this man was more seriously affected and had to be removed from the exercise. After 35 minutes, one of the radio operators had become incapable of using his set, and the efficiency of the rocket launcher team was also very impaired. 10 minutes later, the attacking section had lost all sense of urgency. Notice the bunching and indecision as they enter a wood occupied by the enemy. Almost immediately, the section commander tried to use a map to find the location of troop headquarters, and a prisoner's escort had to have the way pointed out to him, although it was in plain sight, 700 yards away over open country. 50 minutes after taking the drug, radio communication had become difficult, if not impossible, but the men are still capable of sustained physical effort. However, constructive action was still attempted by those retaining a sense of responsibility in spite of physical symptoms. But 1 hour and 10 minutes after taking the drug, with one man climbing a tree to feed the birds, the troop commander gave up, admitting that he could no longer control himself or his men. He himself then relapsed into laughter.